santo, tutto è santo, tutto è santo. Non c'è niente di naturale nella natura, ragazzo mio. Tientilo bene in mente.
Which is to be hath already been, that which is now hath already been to be, and that which is now.
When Dogfish had began about 13 years ago now, we had the same mission that we have today, which is off-centered ales for off-centered people. We really have never been interested in catering to the status quo and brewing the kinds of beers that are already dominating the marketplace, nor did we assume that we would ever be brewing for a majority of the beer drinkers out there, and I doubt that we ever will. Because we've been playing around with non-traditional brewing ingredients since the day we opened, we get a large number of unsolicited pitches from people asking us to try out an ingredient in a beer that they think would be a great idea. One was we got cloudberries from the Arctic Circle once and brewed a beer with them and kind of didn't do our homework on what the costs would be, and after freight and all the importing fees, we would have had to charge, I think, $19 per snifter at our pub just to break even. So that was a really fun project, and the beer was amazing, but it probably wasn't sustainable as far as something we could release on the marketplace. One of the greatest that we got was from John, the wood flooring salesman, who happened to be a hardcore Dogfish head beer guy. Wood has a really central role in our brewery, in our company. Our menu at our pub is based around this big open wood grill where we use hickory and oak logs to cook our food. The interior of our pub, the decor is centered around this wood that I got from a salvage barn that was along the Connecticut River up in New England. Our artwork, I found this 19th century wood stamp set, and we do our proprietary doggy font, do a lot of our artwork and packaging from this wood stamp set. I think, though, probably the most central way that we use wood here historically has been with beer. And I think Dogfish Head was among the first craft breweries to wood-age beers, starting in 1996 with our Immort Ale, which is made with maple syrup from my dad's farm in Massachusetts, juniper berry, peat smoked barley, and French oak. So wood has really been central to what we've been doing in our brewery, and we use it as an ingredient, as something to magnify the complexity of our beers.
This particular wood is quite unique. First and foremost, there are a lot of similar species between the continents of Africa and South America, and many people are familiar with the species called frankincense. This is the South American cousin of frankincense. The Palo Santo, I learned, is also used by a few small artisanal wineries in Chile and Argentina. While I haven't visited any of these, I took immediate interest, and because I have personal interest in the world of craft beer, I started to wonder, well, if it works with wine, why can't it work with beer? I immediately thought of Dogfish. I remember the first time I saw a Dogfish beer. It was at the Good Love Lounge in Baltimore. It was their Copper Ale, which I don't even think they make anymore. But it was quite good. And from there on out, I knew every time I saw a new Dogfish beer, I had to try it. Over the course of time, I got to know that they were more pioneers in the way of trying new combinations, interesting combinations of ingredients to yield interesting, very bold beers. This particular species has been coveted through the ages for all the medicinal properties and all of the physical properties that it possesses. It's one of the densest woods in the world. It will sink in water, and it's one of the very few woods that will sink in water. It's harder than almost any other type of wood out there, and it has a high resin content, and this resin has been used throughout the ages to treat various ailments from stomach problems to even a pre-Renaissance cure for syphilis.
We try not to really ever brew anything twice. This is one exception because this beer is going to go into full-scale production at the beginning of 2008. So we're brewing a smaller size batch, about 4 barrels today, about roughly 8 kegs, to just make sure we've got that recipe absolutely dialed in with some of the few changes that we decided on after tasting the last batch. And then this recipe will get passed on to our lead brewer, Brian, who runs the brewing production side of things at our Milton Brewery. And he'll then take that recipe and ramp it up to his 100-barrel system, which produces 200 kegs at a batch. And he'll have to change the recipe somewhat to fit his process up there. It's a different brew system, much larger.
It's hopped with a couple of additions of Warrior hops, and as well as some Glacier and some Palisade hops. What that'll contribute is a nice, somewhat spicy, fruity, floral aroma to the beer. It's a very high gravity brown ale which uses chocolate malt, crystal malt, and black malt, as well as some wheat for a little added texture and complexity. We're using a Scottish ale yeast strain, which will be a little bit fruity and quite delicious.
As you may detect in the beer, there is quite a unique flavor imparted on the beverage by this wood. And if you ever have an opportunity to put a piece of this wood up to your nose, you'll notice that it has quite an interesting aroma to it and is commonly traded as incense. I brought back with me a quantity of this wood in my suitcase, shrink wrapped. It was interesting going through customs, telling them I had, was it 7 kilos in my bag.
And when I finally got to smell and hold and touch that wood, I immediately started thinking about what would be an ideal beer to use with this wood. And I wanted to do something relatively full-flavored. I wanted it to be a brown ale because I knew that the wood itself would throw some color, and not so dark that it would be opaque. I knew that for the flavors and the aromas of the wood to shine through, it would have to have a relatively low hop profile, but that because it was going to be relatively big, it would have a good amount of bittering hops, just not a lot of aroma hops to get in the way of the aromas of the wood.
So here at Dogfish, I have the luxury of getting to come up with a different recipe with Sam in collaboration roughly every 3 weeks, and take it to the brew house here and come up with something new and exciting and special. We try not to do anything normal or like any other brewer out there. It's very integral to our philosophy, and especially what I do here at the pub. I have that much more ability to make something completely off the beaten path. Sam actually tries to make us make something that's never been made before here each time. With
very few additional suggestions, I came with that template to Mike, and we did a test batch at our pub in Rehoboth, 5-barrel batch, and it was really well received. We shared that with some folks at beer festivals and regulars at our pub, and pretty soon there was a nice buzz on the internet and in the beer community about this really unique beer.
So a natural question is, why would anybody in this day and age of stainless steel equipment actually install wooden fermentation tanks? And it is a very valid question. Wood was used historically because it was the available material. Nowadays we have better materials for cleanability and overall resistance to rusting, but wood imparts something special in beer. It gives flavors and character that you can't get in a metal tank. So we've decided to spend some ridiculous amounts of money and invest in the biggest wooden tank project in any brewery in North America since before Prohibition.
Palo Santo it's an interesting story. It's an interesting part of the world we're incorporating into what we're doing here at Dogfish. It's an interesting wood with a whole lot of interesting uses, as we've come to find out, but it's expensive wood. Experimentation is not cheap, as pharmaceutical companies know, as anybody knows. Not everything turns into an instant success overnight, so you start in smaller volumes, and then as it gains traction in the marketplace, we make more of it.
When John was down in Paraguay visiting the lumber place where they were preparing our wood, he told the locals that he wanted to see the wood in its natural setting, the wood that they were using specifically for our tanks. So they drove him 7 hours into the wilderness, and the locals got out of their truck and started hacking away at a tree with a machete, trying to get to the aromatic heartwood beneath the bark. and this tree's so dense that they couldn't get through. So one of the guys left, went to his car, returned with a .38 revolver, and stood 5 feet from the tree and just started unloading on the tree. And they all just sat there with their mouths open when the bullets just bounced off the tree and landed at the base. And it gives you an idea just how dense this wood is, and that density definitely contributes to the complexity of the flavor of the beer.
There's quite a few breweries